You are listening to Talking Images, the official podcast of icmforum.com.
We made it, everyone. I can barely believe it, but we have reached our 100th episode. 101st if you count the title, which of course we won't, but we will talk about it. And what a weird start that was. Anyhow, this will be a different kind of episode. We'll take you behind the scenes. We'll walk down memory lane from our proudest moments to our misfires, cringe-worthy comments, and regrets. We have it all. We'll also let you know what our most listened to episodes of all time are, and break down which of our hosts have been in the most episodes, because it is a competition and one that I, Chris, hi and welcome back by the way, have won. But who's next? I got Saul, Tom, Adam, and Ben here today. So, old generation, new generation of hosts, and possibly we'll have some call-ins too. Let's see. Maybe some cameos, as we'll explore our exhibitionism and self-satisfaction in hosting a small, niche film podcast. I think it makes sense to bring in you first here, Adam, because we're the person that I essentially launched this, what do you call it, proof of concept with. You were the only other person in the pilot, which is this about 20-minute episodes of us just talking. We ended up rambling about The Simpsons because you've been watching it at the time, and loads of what happened afterwards got cut because it didn't even make too much comprehensive sense. But it's a fun episode to listen back through, and I think we were on fire already then. So first of all, that episode was called Nobody Watches The Simpsons Anymore, and the new episodes are not allowed to be any good. So have you been watching The Simpsons at all since then? And how was it like being in that pilot?
Yeah, so I was doing like a big binge watch of the first few seasons of The Simpsons, which is why I think we spoke about it. But I haven't watched it at all since then. I haven't watched any of the new ones. I was just in the period of like watch some of the old ones. So I did listen back to the episode once a long time ago, maybe like a year or two ago. I listened back, and I don't know if I could listen again because it was it was a difficult listen. One of the challenges for me with the podcast has always been listening to episodes that I'm in, because it's kind of strange hearing your own voice. That's got slightly easier over time, but yeah, the Simpsons one, it was a difficult listen. And when we first did the podcast, I think I was okay in the pilot one because it was just us having a chat. But when we first did the podcast, I think the early episodes, I found it very difficult at the start, kind of speak and not feel totally nervous.
Glad that you turned that around at least a bit, because you've been such a great contribution. And I mean, that's why you were absent for so much of season 1 as well. You just, I guess you got a bit cold feet after that pilot episode. But yeah, no, I listened back to it once a long time ago too, and it was great fun listening back. And I think it just flowed so well. I think we can also bring in Tom here, because while Adam stepped into a producer role for much of season 1 and just helped with so much behind the scenes, Tom was one of the original co-hosts that participated in our very first true episode, which was called How We Got Into Cinema, which just walked down, kind of like this episode really, memory lane, but more personal moments. I guess I can ask the same thing to you as I asked Adam, Tom. Like, did you think you'd be sitting here 4 or 5 years later when you recorded for that episode?
Probably not. I don't think it had even crossed my mind at that point. But I do remember recording that episode, and like Adam, I was quite nervous. It was the first time doing a podcast, and I wasn't really that familiar with everyone else involved. I spoke to a few people on the forum now and again, but when you put out the request to see if anyone wanted to join in the podcast, I wasn't particularly heavily involved in ICM Forum, but it just kind of grabbed my attention. I think it was around about the time of the pandemic, something to do, to focus on, and enjoyed every moment ever since then.
Yeah, we've enjoyed every moment with you as well, Tom. And yeah, post the pandemic, it's amazing to think that this whole thing really started because we were all locked at home. And what did people around the world do? They create a podcast. We were one of those podcasts. I'm not sure how many of those are still around. So I guess that's a gold star in somewhere either on our church or in a closet somewhere. But it's so nice to just see that people who were around from those very first moments are still here. And while he was not in that first episode, he did join pretty shortly after. And I can reveal that he's actually the host that's been in the second most episodes. It's our very own Saul. And you're actually the only person here who has hosted an episode all on their own, the interview episode with the director and producer of the horror film Like Dogs. So what was that experience like for you, Saul?
Hi, Chris. Hi, everyone. It was very daunting doing the episode alone, just because I had sort of organized to have a couple of people join and then they weren't able to join. So it ended up just being me along with the director and the producer. But they were more than happy to talk. They had tons of stories about making the film and information to share. So it was a really good, positive experience overall. But I did feel a little bit overwhelmed because it was just me alone with them and they were expecting a couple more people on, but they didn't mind. It went down well. So yeah, it was a positive experience overall.
You handled that really well. And I think it actually made a lot of sense to just have one host there too. Obviously, we've done a few interview episodes. Some of them we had quite a few hosts sitting in, coming with questions along the way. But I think the way you did it felt really, really structured. So well done holding down the fort on that occasion. And finally, we have a bit of semi-new blood with us here. It's Ben, also known as Flavo, 5000 on the forum. He's been in 5 episodes at the moment, including the next one coming up, which I can tease is about Clint Eastwood's westerns. So, do you remember, Ben, which episode you joined first? And what was it that made you want to step into the fire of having your voice out there on the internet?
Well, the first one I appeared on was the found footage episode, I think. So I've been doing audiobooks on LibriVox for the last couple of years. So I was already used to having people hear me talking on the internet for a while before that. So honestly, it was just kind of boredom. Someone said, hey, why don't you pop on this podcast? And I was like, sure, why not? Sometimes it's just that simple.
I'm glad it was that simple, and it's good to get you with us because it's so nice to get blood in. And we've had quite a few first-time hosts along with us the last few years, and some of them have been becoming more and more regular as well. So here's hoping you'll stick with us for a long time to come. And I think it's a very nice setup here now. So we have old generation, we have new generation, we have a lot of memories to go through. So I'd love to just start opening up the floor for everyone to bounce in, bounce off each other. So I can start in semi-alphabetical order, skipping you for now, Ben, since you're the most recent. And let's start with Adam. Just how would you describe your journey and progress with this podcast? I mean, you already mentioned, Adam, that you felt very shy about your voice going in. And you mentioned that that's been getting better, but how would you describe that journey, that progress, and just getting more comfortable with hearing yourself speak? Do you listen to the episode release where you're a co-host now?
Yeah, well, I decided a while ago to try and listen to all the episodes from the start. So I've listened to quite a lot of them, including ones that I'm in. I haven't listened to any for a few weeks, but it just got easier because it gradually gets more normal hearing yourself speak on the podcast. So I would say it's easier now than it was at the start. I think in terms of like the journey, I think I was in quite a few of the early ones, and then there was maybe 2 years when I was barely in it. And then there was a point maybe last year when I 2022, 23, I decided to make a big effort to try and be in as many episodes as possible. And I think that helped a lot because the more episodes you record, the easier it gets. I still find it difficult if it's like, for example, when we did the Clint Eastwood Westerns episode, that one was quite challenging because everyone on the episode was like incredibly knowledgeable about the topic. So for me, it depends on it depends on who the other people in the episode are and how sort of heavy the topic is in terms of how comfortable I feel. But I basically decided to be in as many as I can that I'm interested in. And it makes it easier over time and you get more comfortable. And also I feel like particularly the ones who've been there from the start, I think we know each other very well by now. So that also makes it feel like a lot more comfortable for me, just that I feel like I know everyone pretty well.
And that's great to hear. And I think I actually changed my mind. I'm going to bring Ben in here after all, because you don't know everyone here that well. So, like, how was that dynamic when, Adam, Saul, Tom, and I, and a few of the other co-hosts as well, has been recording for almost 5 years now? Like, how was it like entering that dynamic? Was it did you ever feel like you were just stepping into somewhere where you didn't quite belong, or did it make you feel comfortable? And feel free to be completely honest.
It really didn't affect me too much. I tend to be a fairly easygoing person, so I don't really get intimidated or bothered by pre-existing dynamics like that. So it was fine. And you guys didn't, make me, well, maybe Saul tried to make me feel as uncomfortable as possible, but
yeah, so you're writing there in the chat, he failed terribly at making you uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Sorry, I couldn't help it.
All those awkward questions about my relationship history right off the bat had nothing to do with found footage. Just very inappropriate.
Oh, yeah, the found footage episode too, that was such a fun episode to record. And I think that also shows, we managed to get you in as someone who just loves horror in general, so loves horror. So even though he was trying to make you uncomfortable, something clicked, I suppose. What about you, Saul? I mean, besides failing to make Ben feel uncomfortable and leave, how has the journey been for you?
The main thing that I think I've really progressed along with in my journey is talking, knowing that I'm being recorded and it needs to be edited afterwards. So I found that these days when I'm doing a podcast, I'm doing less umming and erring. If I can't think of a word or a sentence, I try and pause. And I guess part of that is because for the last year or year and a half, I've actually become one of the main editors of the episodes along with Chris. I'm editing pretty much half the episodes. So I sort of know that if I manage to not and I manage to pronounce my words correctly, it's going to be easier for me to edit afterwards. I do like to think that it's helping me out also in my job, because in my job I am talking quite a bit. And I think because I'm becoming more conscious of my umming and erring and slurring of words together when I'm doing a podcast, I think when I'm teaching, I also think about that. And I think I'm becoming a bit more effective of talking to a class just because I'm used to with these podcasts having to talk more clearly. So that's probably going to be the biggest takeaway from me in terms of my progress in this journey.
Oh, wow, yeah, that's such a good point, Saul. I didn't even think about that. But yeah, I do a lot of presentation in my line of work as well. And before this podcast, I had a tendency to just speak incredibly fast and be a bit incomprehensible. So if I feel like I'm ever doing that, I put on my presenter voice. I'm not sure if that comes off as a bit off. Oh, I see Saul is writing that I still speak fast. It used to be worse, as a lot of people can attest to. This is Chris on slow mode. So you can't even imagine, I suppose.
Yeah, just to jump in, I remember that when a few of us from the forum did a holiday to Malta to visit Chris, and Chris almost passed out, I think, on the first day from hyperness and speaking so much and so fast. So yeah, he's always been very enthusiastic and definitely lots of energy.
Well, I'm glad to still have some energy left, even after all of these years. And yes, so there's some testament to just how much faster my voice can be, in case any of you ever thought, yeah, that guy who's speaking a lot, he's just too fast. It could have been worse, everybody. jump through you then, Tom. Once again, you were here from the very, very beginning. What do you think has changed the most for you in your role as a host?
Well, I think that over time, the conversations have become more natural. At first, it was kind of daunting and a bit intimidating because I didn't really have rapport with everyone. I came in as a relative stranger. But over the years, as we've been recording episodes, I feel like we've got a great group of friends here now. And I've always loved talking about films, but it gets easier the more you learn about your co-hosts, their personalities, their perspective on films. And to be honest, I just love recording the episodes with everyone because it's so much fun just discussing our passions together. Even if we're not interested in the exact same type of films, there's a lot of crossover, and it's just a great environment to speak to like-minded people. And one thing that I also think is worth bringing up is that I still don't know what half of you look like. I've not met anyone in real life, so it's mad. I feel like I've got close friends, but I've never seen you. We need to do a video episode, don't we? That's what we need to get sorted next. Maybe for our 200th episode, we do a video one. How about that?
Yeah, I would definitely be up for a video session, or as Adam was writing in the chat, an actual in-person recording session as well. That would be amazing. Yeah, I haven't actually met most of you either. I met Adam quite a few times, but of the other regular co-hosts, I have not. So that is definitely something that could change. I mean, we have a lot of Australians now, so they can definitely do a meetup anytime they want to. But I'm up here in a different kind of island. Anyways, no, I think I fully agree. I mean, it does feel like we have become close friends, and maybe we chat about everything outside of the podcast as well. What used to be a super professional and dry set of channels here have become the playground for others. A lot of personal chatter, a lot of film chatter as well. So just great to see how this developed from a group of mostly relative strangers. I just can't believe it's done this way. I already asked Ben this, and I already mentioned too that a large part of the reason why we went down this road was the pandemic. It was the fact that we were locked in, but I have been trying to get some kind of podcast launched for years. I've been speaking to Adam, I've been speaking to other people who ended up not being in the podcast. I've been pushing it on the forum because it is just so great to be able to speak about film in person, and the fact that we can also record it, send it out there, have other people listen to it, and as we'll reveal later, hundreds of people have been listening to some of our most popular episodes, which is just amazing. It's really turned into just such a great time, and it's also just such a great way to just motivate ourselves to do it as well, just knowing that, hey, every other week or so we sit down and we talk about film. Absolutely fantastic. But I'd love to hear your various reasons for why you chose to take part in this episode, in this podcast to begin with. So if we can start with you again, Adam, what was it that made you want to be in this podcast?
But I think, first of all, the timing of it being the pandemic, obviously, it felt like a natural time to start the podcast because everyone was at home, and I think it really helped just to have people you were speaking to in the podcast. But I think on top of that, Chris, like you said, you'd mentioned it for a long time that you wanted to do a podcast. And I'd always agreed. I always felt like, we had the forum. The natural kind of step would be to have a podcast, especially like we were hosting our own forum as well. We were paying for it and everything. And it just felt like another thing for us to do. And yeah, so I think that was the main reason, one, the timing with the pandemic, but then two, just that I think it felt like the next step for us. And I think when we started, we all probably kind of felt like, maybe we didn't think about it, but I feel like we all probably felt this was just something we'd do for a little while the pandemic was happening. But then I think it became clear it became clear early on that actually this could be a long-term thing. So it's pretty amazing that, 4 or 5 years later, we're still doing it.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I always thought this would end much faster. I think at some point, probably at the end of season 1, maybe in season 2, I started to realize that, hey, we really got something here that could start running for a very long time, and that seems to be true. So I just, but still, it's amazing to be here and have reached the 100th episode. What about you, Tom? Because like you said, you didn't actually know any of that. Well, you weren't even that much of a regular on the forum, I think you said, which is interesting. So I guess in a way this podcast brought you closer to icmforum.com. Just to plug that in, we are the official podcast of icmforum.com, as the intro says. What was it that made you break the mold and just join these people that you only partially knew up until that point?
So you're right, I was a bit of a lurker on the forum at the time I joined the podcast, but I'm always up for discussing and recommending films. I've done film reviews for years before starting on the podcast, and this just seemed like a logical next step to share my views on films with more people. Over the years, all the listeners who've checked out our episodes, it's just a great way to share my recommendations and try and get topics that I'm interested in, try and push horror episodes and things like that. And I've had so much fun doing it. It's been brilliant. I think at the start, I did want to try and be in every episode. I did find that I'd burnt out a bit on that because I was watching a lot of films that I wasn't particularly interested in just so I could take part in the episode. So I've kind of taken a bit of a step back on that these past few years, but that's worked better for me now because all the episodes that I take part in, things that I feel passionate about and that I'm really excited to talk about.
Yeah, I think I feel that passion you're speaking about too. It's such a nice drive to be able to push topic you care about, be able to speak to people about those topics. And also it's just so nice that we have people with so many different interests, which means that we can have this whole slew of different episodes from, hardcore horror episodes, which you have pushed quite a few of. Well done, by the way. I don't want to stop and count them, but we have Peeping Tom versus Psycho. We have like a full episode about Spanish horror, where we do at least one horror special every single Halloween or October. So you've been able to push quite a few up. We might even do 2 Halloween or October episodes this year. Let's see. That's another hint for what's coming up. But you definitely pushed a nice bit of contributions there, Tom. What about you, Sol? What was it that made you want to join the podcast in the first place?
The reason why I decided to join the podcast is that I absolutely love discussing film. And I've actually really got nobody to talk about film with in real life. I know it sounds a little bit sad, but like none of my friends or close family are actually that interested in cinema. So I could sometimes mention a film, but I can't really get a proper film discussion. I can't really discuss a whole director's work or films from a certain decade or from a certain country. The option isn't just there. So for me, it's just about being able to engage in a discussion with cinema. And it's just not the same writing about it because I've been on film forums. If you include the IMDb days, I've been on movie forums since I was 14 years old. So I have spent time talking about films, as in typing about them online, but it's completely different in person. I know that there is occasionally, there'll be maybe 2 or 3 times a year that I'll find somebody who might just be a relief teacher at school, somebody who I could just talk to for a few minutes about film. And I just get really, really intensely interested in it. I'm really in the zone. And it's just a really great feeling to be able to discuss that. And it doesn't happen to me very often. So for me, the podcast is just a way to be able to talk out loud about the thing which interests me the most. So yeah, that's for me. It's a discussion avenue, and it's something which I'm not able to get in real life.
Yeah, I agree. It's so important to be able to speak about our hobby this way. We have the forum as one avenue, and this is another. And yes, I think it's hard to find people who are as geeky or nerdy or just generally interested in film, and often very specific niches of film, like we are, like Tom and you with your horror, me with art house. etc. Or sorry, Ben as well with horror, or Adam from New York with his encyclopedic almost Western knowledge. We have loved having him on this for a quick cameo today. Let's see if he pops up, but he will be in our Clint Eastwood episode, so look forward to that. We talked a lot here about just this joy of talking about cinema with other people, but are there any episodes or conversations that you actively regret or cringe over? I'm just saying this to get the negatives out of the way first. Are there any moments in Talking Images history that still haunt you and you just wish had not happened?
The episode that I would say I regret the most was the first episode that I participated in, which was about Klaus Kinski and the second Nosferatu film that he made. When I decided to participate in the episode, I did it because I'd missed the first one. I actually missed the very first one about how I got into cinema because I got the time zone differences mixed up, and by the time I'd signed on, everybody had already finished. So I decided, look, I'll join for the second one. And I did actually ask beforehand, do I need to see the second Nosferatu film, or is it just going to be a general chat about Klaus Kinski? And I was told at the time, probably by Chris, I'm not sure, I was told at the time though, we'll do some general discussion about Klaus Kinski, or so you can talk about him then. And yet the entire recording was about that Nosferatu episode. And I made a couple of comments about Klaus Kinski towards the end when we had a general discussion. But yes, I have been waiting years to say this, Adam. He's just written that in the chat. And I've been waiting years. It does sort of feel like that. Because it's the one episode that I do regret being in, just because I don't think I made a proper contribution there. I didn't feel like it was a good intro to order Talking Images. I think everything else I've been pretty much okay with, but that's one where if I went back in time, I would at least watch that second Nosferatu film. I actually had it on VHS, and that's back when I was in my old place when the VCR was hooked up. So I actually could have done it, and I should have. And hindsight is 2020.
Well, I can't imagine it being me because I had picked the episode name long before we even did the episode, which was to plug it, though it is a bit rough around the edges. Klaus Kinski played Nosferatu twice, and the second one is terrible. So I don't think I would be the one to steer the wrong way. But you never know. Maybe it was me, and I was really setting you up for failure there, like you were trying to do with Ben. Did anyone else have any particular regrets about the episodes or moments from our past?
Yeah, well, I think the big one that jumps to mind for me was obviously the recent episode about strategic voting. Because sometimes when you're recording episodes, because we've kind of done this for 4 or 5 years, you almost forget that you're being recorded and it just turns into a bit of a chat. Also, because I don't edit the episodes, I don't really listen to it before it goes out. So yeah, the strategic voting episode, obviously I made a kind of jokey comment about other film communities. I obviously wish I hadn't said that now because like I said, when you're doing the recording, it's like a chat between friends and you don't really think about what's going to get released. You don't think about who's going to listen. And certainly the intent of the podcast is not to kind of alienate anyone that likes films from other like forums or other film communities. So I definitely wish I hadn't said that or it had been edited out because I had absolutely no idea when I was sort of like chatting that I'd actually even said anything that could be seen as like a negative because we were just having a kind of laugh about one thing that happens like in certain episodes like that the joke was like Soul votes strategically, so then it became a kind of let's gang up on Soul and it's all very lighthearted and jokey, but I think it doesn't always translate when the episode is released. It's all a bit of a joke, and sometimes sometimes things sound harsher than you intend them because it kind of feels like it's like someone recording like a group of friends having a chat and you don't really, what you might say in that situation is not what you'd say if you were thinking, hey, this is going to get released to everyone. So yeah, that's my 10 minutes on that.
Yeah, that caused a bit of a stir and a lot of misunderstandings, and people from other communities we didn't even think would be listening to to this podcast, feeling it was about them, which I don't think that was ever the intention at all. So that was very, very unfortunate. And I guess if I had any regrets, it's like not realizing that when I was editing the episode either, that hey, that this could be seen as juicier than it was, because this was one of those super fun episodes where we are just being tongue-in-cheek, we're being nasty to Saul, we're all ganging up on him. That was the whole premise. Saul is the quote-unquote cheater, and let's just have lots of throw-around remarks that are over the top. And yeah, especially if people aren't used to listening to our podcast, I can see why that could be misconstrued when we do fun episodes, and especially when they're back to back with more, heavy episodes. I don't really think I have any other proper regrets. I guess because I have so much editing overview that I can, if I would ever say something wrong or terrible, I can fix it usually. And there hasn't been anything that have really been caught out. And I remember, though, there's always some minor discussions and stuff in the past, of course. I think my major regret is just not knowing editing as well when we started out, because a lot of our early episodes, I had this secret wish of wanting to go back and re-edit them, because there's pops here and there, they're not smooth, and I didn't know how to remove noise. It took a while before I knew how to properly adjust volume. So some of these older episodes we had from season 1, they're just not as good as the ones we have now, even though I'm very proud of the content in them. Do anyone else have any regrets of what's been said or done in the podcast along the way? Or have I done anything that you guys have been upset about?
I regret nothing.
Good. So we were all out of regrets already, though there's definitely been some missed opportunities along the way. Like we talked about how when we had dual podcasts with Autism Through Cinema, we didn't get any of their hosts who has autism on the podcast. We only had one of the participants who is a professor and an expert. So that could have been even better if we had gotten one of them on, for instance. So it had been more on brand for their podcast as well. So that was a great episode that I'm still very, very, very proud of. And I see now as well that we actually have our very first and possibly only cameo along the way. Arthur is here, known as Pretentious Hipster on icmforum.com, and he's been in just one single episode so far, but hopefully he'll join us for many, many more. So first of all, it's great to have you here. Thank you for stopping by, Arthur. And what was it that made you take part in that episode, and would you be open to joining in for others?
I definitely would be interested in joining for the other episodes. It's just, working in the kitchen work is just a requirement almost most of the time. And especially with the time zones too, that can get in the way. But basically the reason why I joined that specific episode, which was about like overloading and needing a break from films and stuff like that, it was just a topic that I clicked with at the most, because during that time I kind of lost interest for films, which is kind of funny for being in a film podcast during that time. Looking at various topics that we talk about in a chat room, I definitely would like to join some other ones. I think I just have high standards of research and stuff like that, so I was kind of doing a case of self-intimidation, if that makes sense. Like I remember for the Moldova episode, I just thought, I have to watch like as many as possible and find research on books and stuff like that, which really won't be required. But I guess it was just because I had that YouTube channel before, and I'd spend time looking up old magazines and old videos and just trying to get as much in-depth knowledge as possible, and that can kind of be a hindrance depending on how far you take that.
Yeah, I can definitely get that. And I think that's also why we have some lighter episodes to give ourselves a break between the heavy ones. Though, yeah, you don't have to go through that much reading material. In fact, the Moldova episode is indefinitely postponed. So if you're ever up for that one again, unless it's too big a burden, we can try to schedule that in for perhaps season 6 or something like that to see how that goes.
If we did a David Dakota marathon podcast, would you join that one?
Funny timing. I was actually going to see 2 Dakotas today, so I totally would be. But I think it would just be me talking most of the time, and like Guess You and just everyone else laughing at the absurdity of his films.
Yeah, I would imagine a lot of listeners are thinking, I have no idea who David Dakota is. Just know that he is an unheralded masterwork of a director that everyone needs to dive into as many films as possible.
Yeah, I do know Talking Cat is quite infamous on YouTube, especially the gaming circles, because one of the bigger YouTubers covered it. But for people that has actually seen his work, especially stuff outside of that one film, it's such a small number, and I really have no idea why. He's technically one of the most auteurs, I guess you could say. You could definitely tell that it's a Dakota film, even if you don't know much about his work. Just look for guys that are shouting about soap, basically.
I have still never seen a film by that guy, and from the descriptions, I haven't been that enthused. But if you push through that episode, Arthur, I will participate. I will see at least a few of his films, and hopefully, it's not going to be as torturous as some people have been suggesting it might be for me. That's a couple of promises for you, Arthur. Let's see which future episodes you join us in, and thank you so much for stopping by.
It's definitely no problem. I will definitely look up the schedule to see if there's any that click with me, and hopefully I'll provide some great input to it.
And again, no need to do that extensive of research, but to bring back the other hosts again, because we spoke a little bit about these more fun episodes, these antagonistic episodes, if you will, and obviously we've had a few pretty feisty ones, and some that were destroyed, including destroyed by Tom by just being too reasonable. So we had one where people were ganging up on me for hating short films or avoiding short films. I think Tom was co-defendant there. We had one where we all ganged up on Saul, like we said, about voting strategically. That caused some furore. And we have one coming up about why Tom hates documentaries. So I would like to know, what are some views you want, or better yet, are afraid that we'll gang up on you for in the future?
I sort of feel that a lot of episodes turn into gang up on Soul episodes, so I think it will happen again in the future. But look, I don't mind as long as I can properly express my views on a subject. I don't really mind. Like with the strategic voting, I don't really mind as long as I have a chance to say my piece on it. That's okay.
So you said that so many episodes have been ganging up on you already. Are there any other topics that you're afraid we're going to gang up on you next?
Yeah, I don't know. It's probably only if we go back and revisit some of the other stuff. Like, people have already told me off for watching movies on an iPad rather than watching them on a big screen TV. So there's just stuff like that. So unless we do another episode like that, I don't know. But there's probably other weird things that I do that would annoy other people. But we did already have the Film Purism podcast where we talked about stuff like that. But I'm sure there's other opinions and other ideas and other things I do that are a bit strange and out there. So I'm sure people will be able to come up with something.
Fair enough. And Tom, you were the one we ganged up on last about your hatred of documentaries, or just disinterest in documentaries. And you ruined it for us, man. I mean, you were just too reasonable, too understanding. You deflated all of my baity questions. That was not the blast I hoped it would be, though. I do hope people enjoyed that episode. Are there any topics or opinions you have where you think we can be even more vicious with you?
Perhaps my disinterest in TV shows in general, although I think that's kind of not really what we're about anyway. We're a film podcast, so TV series rarely come up. But other than documentaries and shorts, which you mentioned, TV series is probably the other area that I just have zero interest in. But it's all good fun. I don't mind it when everyone gangs up. I think it's a good laugh, and it just shows, how comfortable we are as a team, that we take the abuse and come back to record another episode and get on with things.
Yeah, or just deflate everything and be too reasonable and just not make it as juicy as an episode as it otherwise could have been. What about you, Adam? I don't think we actually ganged up on you, though you were a bit ganged up on after that recent episode. We were all ganged up on Saul, so I guess that went full circle. Do you have any opinions or views that you think that we could all gang up on you in the future?
I guess the only thing that comes to mind, we kind of did a comedies episode, but I do have a lot of hatred for a lot of comedies. So, including ones that I know like Chris and others like a lot for some reason. So, I feel like comedies is probably the most controversial view I have, like the Soviet comedies and the European comedies and everything. So that's the only thing I can think of where at least I tend to like have a good tactic, which is, bring Lauren on board. She'll probably have a similar view to me, and it feels a little bit less like being ganged up against if you've got a partner in the episode.
Fair enough. I mean, we could try that. I mean, I think one of the topics that keep coming up is the dislike of Turkish comedies, but I'm largely with you as well, and a lot of people that are with you, so we'd have to get some Turks or other people that actually love, for instance, Halban Zanifi on to be able to gang up, because we've been struggling to find anyone who really loves the Halban Zanifi films. I think one person we've come across along the years, and he's not a regular on the forum. So that's definitely something we need to strive for. We need to get those people from the cultures of comedies that we have not been getting.
I do enjoy a lot of the Turkish like fantasy and sci-fi movies from that time, but their comedies are god awful.
Yeah, sorry, Turkish listeners. I'm inclined to agree. But that brings us to you then, Ben, our new starter. You wrote in the chat earlier that you felt left out because no one has ganged up on you so far. Do you have any controversial opinions that we could just grab a hold of and just go full frontal attack?
I mean, if you ever did an episode on the lauded director of screensavers, James Benning, perhaps?
Oof, maybe we should. Yeah, that is controversial. Law director of screensavers. Let's.
I can point a camera at a lake for 30 minutes too. Just saying.
Well, this is getting very, very, very tense, Ben, and I'm struggling to contain myself for sure. So let's actually see if we can get that episode going and just all dig into Ben. Though I don't think it is an as controversial view in this group as it might be some other places. But I see we actually have our second cameo of the episode here. Our previously mentioned Adam from New York, the Western expert, is here in person. You'll hear him soon again in our Clint Eastwood episode. But so happy you joined in, American Adam, and I just love to hear from you. Like, first of all, like, you've been kind of a part of the show from Season 1, Season 2, but then you kind of just trickle in whenever we do a Western episode. Do you remember, have you been in an episode that's not Western related, and would you?
Yeah, I have been. And hello, everyone, and thank you for the intro. This is an unexpected cameo for me. I just happened to wander into the Discord and saw this was active. Yeah, I've been here a while, but I think like a classic sort of, Western gunslinger, I wander into town, I wander out of town, and then I wander back in on rare occasions. Western episodes I've been a part of. I've been part of a few that weren't Western. I mean, first of all, the quiz episode, which I hosted last year, and we've got quiz episode number 2 coming up. And I got involved early from when you guys had the first or second episode where you talked about, how you got into cinema, and I got jealous and I messaged Chris and I said, I want to be a part of this. Although not on a very frequent basis.
Yeah, I mean, we need to strategize something to get you on more recently. And I can't believe it. Of course, you are the quiz master. I missed that episode last time, though hopefully I'll be in the next one. It was so much fun listening in and just participating along the way and seeing okay, who could I beat here if I was actually there on the spot?
I hope it's not hopefully. I mean, I have you down as a participant. I thought you were definite. I consider you the biggest threat to knock Saul off the podium this time.
All right, good. Yeah, I'll try to do that. Let's see. Aside from hosting for quiz nights, though, because you, like you said, you are the resident quiz master. Like, what else do we have to do to get you on this podcast more often?
Oh, I mean, look, everyone here does not need to cater to me to, keep this podcast going. I tend to only involve myself in those sort of episodes where I really feel I have something significant to contribute. Or in other words, on most of the topics, I don't have much to contribute. And I don't have, I guess, sort of like the patience to sort of, when like a Romer episode comes along and I've seen maybe one Romer movie, I don't have the patience to go watch 6 of them. So I think I'm always going to be, a very occasional co-host.
Well, that's fair enough. It's good to have that gunslinger who just rides in and shoots up knowledge and it makes a lot of us feel like we should know a lot more than we do. So thank you so much for your specialist contribution when you do choose to ride in.
Absolutely. It's always a pleasure to engage in conversation.
All right. Second cameo of the day. Let's see if we get any more along the way. I would love to hear more about what types of episodes you do actually love doing. So we mentioned a little bit about our antagonistic fun episodes so far, but quite a few different types of episodes. We do episodes specifically about one film. We have done a couple of versus episodes where we pin films against each other. We do these more heavy hitters where we watch 4, 5, 6, sometimes 12 plus films from a specific director and talk about all of them. And then we have just a long range of different kinds of just general topics, which is free-flowing, anyone can join, and there's just a set of easy prepared questions in advance. I'd love to just hear, like, type of episodes do you like the most?
Well, I'll chime in, and then, I don't want to hog the mic here, so I'll skedaddle and turn it over to everyone else. I'll just say I think that the episodes that tend to be a little more effective are those that are a little more focused on fewer titles rather than more titles. Just for example, I remember one of the non-Western episodes I participated in was the Academy Awards episode. And I enjoyed that to the extent that I thought it was interesting to talk about the Academy Awards sort of as a general phenomenon. But we also sort of put every single Academy Awards movie on the table as a potential topic of conversation. And that was enjoyable. But I mean, we went through so many movies. And I just wonder if that's like the optimal listening experience. So I think those ones where people dive into a more limited selection of movies is more interesting to listen to and potentially more interesting to speak about. But anyway, thanks to everyone for entertaining me while I stop by. I'm going to, head on out like a High Plains drifter. And thanks, everyone.
There goes Adam, burning down the town as he leaves.
Yeah, just to jump in on that question, I think some of my favorites are the interview episodes or the ones where we have guests. I've only actually been in one of them. So I was in the Mary Gillerman episode. And that's probably the most fun I had in terms of like our preparations for it and just the actual episode itself. But I think even as a listener, some of my absolute favorites have been the interview ones, like the Adam Terrell one, and pretty much all the interview ones I think have been excellent. I've always hoped that we could get 1 or 2 of them per season, and I think we had quite a few early on, but then it's been quite a long time since we've done one. So that's always, I think they're always my favorite overall. Even if I don't participate in most of them, I just think they're really, really interesting ones to listen to. And like the Mary episode was like, there was like really funny moments in that one, and having like, Tom getting in touch with her, and it just the whole journey of like, and then Sol and I watching all the films, and yeah, that was my I think that's my favorite type of episode. I also like some of the lighter ones where we're just having fun, but yeah, that's the kind of thing I hope that we get more of in the future.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there, Adam. And I can't believe I think I forgot to actually include the interviews on the list when I was just describing types of episodes we do, because it has been a little while. But you are completely right. They are some of the best. They're some of the most fun. And with the Mary Gillerman episode, we even got mentioned in her book about her late husband and his film. So that was just absolutely a wonderful surprise. I mean, we're interviewing her on her book, and I guess it wasn't quite finished, and we ended up getting a little paragraph in there. So that was just absolutely fantastic. What about you, Sol? I saw that you wanted to say something. What's your favorite type of episode that we're doing here on Talking Images?
My favorite type of episode is a general chat episode one which is not specifically about a film or director, but just a general topic. Like we've had things like strategic voting, we've had things like Netflix. So just general topics we can talk about without having to watch something beforehand, for me is really great because that's just a topic that I can just join in at any point. The topics that I like the least are the ones that have the most number of watches attached to it. So, like doing a director's filmography, that to me is probably my least favorite type of episode. Yes, I did do the Mary G one, but that was because that was an interview one. But like sitting down and watching like 4 films from Eric Romar that I've never seen before just doesn't really interest me, or going through the entire catalogue of Robert Bresson before doing an episode on him, that's not interesting to me. And at the moment, not everybody else, but a whole bunch of other people are watching a whole number of films that Clint Eastwood has directed. And I'm just like, I don't want to go and rewatch the whole of his filmography. And I know it's not a requirement to go and rewatch everything before participating, but I do sort of feel if I haven't rewatched a film or if it's not fresh in my mind, it doesn't really feel worth participating. So if people want to get me in more episodes, which they probably don't, because I'm already in the second most, but if people wanted me in more episodes, I would be looking at episodes which have less of a viewing component to them. I mean, even single episode films have been fun. I mean, The Straight Story was fun. I love doing 12 Angry Men. So I think single film episodes can be pretty good. General topics are pretty good. But I think anything where it requires more than 3 watches, it's just off-putting to me. And it's a shame because, like Tom said at the start, he wanted to be in every single episode. And I still sort of feel that way, just because I don't have anybody, like I said, to talk to about film in real life. So I sort of feel this is something that I should be doing so I can actually talk out loud about what my passion is rather than just typing it up. However, yeah, if it's one of those ones over there, we're like, oh, we're going to watch 8 films that Clint Eastwood directed. I'm like, well, yeah, I have seen 7 of the 8 of them, but, I don't really want to rewatch the 7 of them to be able to talk about it. So, look, that's my little beef. I know Chris absolutely loves the direct episodes. He wants to do more and more. If Chris had his way, I'd probably have every single episode be a deep dive into director's work, and they'll just annoy the hell out of me. So, luckily, that's not happening at the moment.
Shots fired. I mean, maybe that's going to be the next antagonistic episode. Everyone attacking me or pushing director episodes. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right there. So I mean, I love directors episodes. They're actually one of the reasons why I wanted to do this podcast in the first place. I think one of my original ideas is, damn, I really, really want to rewatch Romer's comedies and proverbs. Let's start a full podcast just to be able to push that through at one point. That's partially a true story. And we did that. So very happy about that. I think that one thing I love about this podcast is that it makes me want to rewatch a lot of films. I'm a notoriously bad rewatcher. I'm trying to get better. Maybe that's something else people can gang up on me for as well. Just having that knowledge that I'll be able to revisit them and I'll be able to speak with them with people who have done the same. That just adds so much extra fun. But no, it would never be every episode. Like, if I have a way, it might be every third episode, which is more or less what I managed to squeeze it to at this point as well. Like, a little bit less than 1/3 maybe, but it's getting there, at least a fourth. So I'm pretty close to getting my will through. What about you, Tom? What's your favorite kind of episode we're doing?
I do love the horror episodes, yeah, no doubt about that. But I do also really enjoy the director-focused episodes, as long as it is about a director that I'm either interested in or a director that I love. So we did the Tarkovsky episode that was great, the Kalatasov episode, and the Claire Denis episodes, and I really enjoyed all of them. I'm on a similar stance to Sol with this, though. If you have to watch a lot of films in preparation for the podcast, it can be a little daunting, but at the same time, it's great having them fresh in your mind and being able to engage in discussions with people who've also seen them recently, because I think they produce some of the episodes that I'm perhaps most proud of when I listen back, and I think this is a great conversation that we've had and we've touched on some fascinating ideas. I do also quite like the deep dives where we're only hitting on the films briefly, so it doesn't necessarily require a rewatch if the films that you're relatively familiar with. So, for instance, the Spanish horror episode, and I really enjoyed the space exploration episode where we looked at things chronologically and just went through and hit a few key films from each that were worth discussing. And that was a lot of fun doing those. And going slightly off on a tangent here, I've just realised that I do have a regret that I'd like to bring up, which is the Terry Gilliam episode that never was. We put a lot of time and effort into rewatching the films that we were going to discuss, and it was a great conversation, but sadly it got lost in the ether, and it's a missing episode, the Talking Images episode that never will be, and that's a great shame.
You are so right on. This is really episode 101. Yeah, that's... Oh, God. That was before we had a cloud set up. That was before we had stored every single episode. Somehow that one just was deleted by the system, and we were never able to recover it. So that was a really, really bad loss, because we had so much fun. I mean, there's highlights from it when we realized that Sting was in was in Baron Munchausen, for instance. Lots of good chatter about Sarah Polley. That was a very, very sad miss. Which we tried to remake it, actually. But it was hard to get the interest of just coming back to something we had so recently recorded. Maybe at some point in the future, we'll see, or maybe that topic has just been burnt down. Oof. Yeah, that brought back some sad memories, indeed. And finally, to you, Ben, I know we haven't been part of that many episodes yet, but what kind of episodes have you enjoyed being a part of so far, and what kind of episodes would you most like to be a part of in the future?
Well, just to pile on Saul, I do like the director-focused ones.
And this is how I win, Saul. This is how I win.
Exactly. Sorry. I mean, Saul, Chris paid me to say that, so, it is what it is.
Okay, that's fine.
I'm saying that as an entry into hoping I can angle for a Godfrey Ho focused episode in the future. Really want to make that happen. Make everyone watch all 150 plus movies of his.
God. I mean, I'm not even a fan. I joined that just because I love the director episodes and to piss off Saul.
The ninja movies are the best, though.
Is there anyone else who wants to speak up to shame Saul and just say how much they love director episodes?
Yeah, me. I think someone mentioned it as well, but I've also loved the sort of single film episodes. 12 Angry Men and The Straight Story are probably two of my absolute favourites that I've been part of. And I really like the director episodes, I think mainly because it's a group of us rewatching the films at the same time and then sort of chatting about them. There's a nice kind of group thing. And I think like Chris said, I also really wanted to see the Eric Romero films again, and it gave me motivation to watch them. So I think they've worked really well, and I think they've worked particularly well, like with Eric Romero, when we split it into a few films in each go. Like we didn't talk about I think it's hard if it's the entire filmography. I think you kind of have to do like what we did with Clint Eastwood, talk about a few westerns, or you have to break down the filmography. I agree with Saul. Like if it's the entire kind of filmography of a director, I don't think that's very easy. But when it's broken down a bit, I think they've been some of the more fun episodes, and I think maybe we should do a whole season just on directors.
Yeah, I was going to say, like Chris had mentioned before, one thing I do like about the director and movie focused episodes is it does force me to go back and do rewatches. I'm really bad about doing rewatches in general, so that's always nice to revisit movies that I've liked in the past.
And to move the conversation along a little bit, Tom, I already mentioned that the director episodes are some of his proudest moments of the show so far. But I'd love to hear, what specific episodes are the proudest moments for you? Which are you the most happy that we did, and which do you have the best memories from?
I was really happy with the Tarkovsky episode, and that's just a reminder that we need to finish the rest of his filmography and get a part 2 on the go, because I'd be more than happy to revisit his later films and give that a go.
Oh yes, I'm up for that anytime. More and more director episodes. What about you? So I'm guessing the ones you're the proudest stuff are not the director episodes, or are there some of those that snuck up there for you too?
Yeah, I'd say direct episodes weren't, can't think of any offhand that I thought were particularly amazing. The ones that I do really enjoy, I really like the film purism one. That was one that I hosted. And I guess the reason why I like that one so much is that I feel like I kind of won the argument. Although it was really just me versus Tom. And I think there might have been a couple of people in between in terms of film purism versus non-film purism. But I thought that was a really interesting and a really fun discussion. I also really like Is Netflix Destroying Cinema? That was a really early one that we did.
I just want to step in there, Sol. You won the argument.
I don't know. We could say maybe it was a draw, but it wasn't one where
I'm taking offence at that. I thought that my film purism won out. Obviously, it didn't persuade you, but yeah, we need a rematch, so I think that's what this is.
Oh, look, I'm happy to do a rematch because there was actually feedback on the forum afterwards. Somebody actually commented that Sol raised the interesting point that films these days are mainly being streamed at home, so maybe directors actually don't expect their films to be watched in one go without pausing. And there wasn't actually a lot of commentary about that. So I do feel there's some untapped potential if you want to go back and revisit film purism later. And I'll be happy to do that because that was one where I didn't feel ganged up upon. Okay, maybe I didn't win it. Maybe it was a draw, but it wasn't like, one where definitely Tom was like. Anyway, I probably will move on from there. Those are the two that I had in mind. The Netflix one and the film purism one.
What about you, Adam? Which episode? I mean, you mentioned Mary Gilliman already, but besides that episode, which are your favorite and which are your proudest moments so far?
Yeah, so I think the Eric Romer episodes, partly because the first one we did, I felt so nervous, and also we had like a 7-hour recording session or something over 2 days. I think the fact that we stuck with it and we've done like a few different episodes on Eric Romer, it feels like an achievement that we've kind of covered so many of his films. I even want to do another one with his last few films, but I kind of feel like that was like a lot of perseverance and that was a real achievement. I also, like I said as well, I think Straight Story, 12 Angry Men were two of my absolute favourites in terms of, I think they were really good discussions, and it was nice just having an episode an entire episode on one film. I think it meant it got a lot more in depth. And I also, like, one of the more fun ones for me was like when we did the origins of the forum and we did that kind of stuff, because it felt a bit more like a sort of relaxed chat about everything. And finally, I guess I would say I like that we've done a couple of How We Got Into Cinema episodes, and hopefully we do another one, because it feels like it shows that we've got so many people that have taken part over the past few years that we actually have like enough people that we can do another like 5 people talking about how they got into cinema. So I think that one is not really a personal achievement, but it kind of demonstrates the strength of the podcast that we've got absolutely tons of people who participate now when we started off with like 5 or 6 of us.
Yeah, that's so true. And while we haven't been in as many of as us, Ben, which episode have you been the most proud of so far?
I think the Peeping Tom and Psycho one turned out really well, actually.
Yes, he's always saying, "Don't say Peeping Tom." Why not, Saul?
Why not?
Oh, yeah, that's one I actually do have some regrets about. I mean, nothing compared to the Klaus Kinski one, which was the first one I participated in. But yeah, the Peeping Tom one, I was telling Chris as I was editing it that I was finding it really repetitive. Like, Chris kept asking the same sort of questions, like which is the area one, which is the more innovative one, which is the scary one, which is the more exciting one. And it was just like the same sort of variations of the same question. And then for all of them, Chris's answer was always Peeping Tom is better. So the whole thing was just a little bit repetitive. I like the idea of it, and I would like to do more episodes where it's one film versus another, because I think they do create some really interesting discussions. But I just thought that one just was a little bit one-sided from Chris the whole way. I think Ben even mentioned during the podcast, is every flaw about Peeping Tom a positive? I don't think Chris said no to that, so I think he actually agreed with that sentiment. So, yeah.
I agreed with was that the music in Psycho is so much
Right.
better, and I think you won me over in the point that I don't remember which of you said it, but said that watching them back to back, like the absence of like memorable music in Peeping Tom is a negative.
Yeah, I liked that episode just because I felt like everyone did have it was a little repetitive, but I think there were a lot of good comments about the films, a lot of insightful comments about the films from all parties involved. And I personally just enjoyed talking about that one quite a bit. And I enjoyed rewatching Psycho and Peeping Tom. I actually just watched Peeping Tom again in the new 4K transfer. And it looks even better. It's a movie that really holds up on rewatches.
Oh yeah, definitely. It definitely does. Like, I'm gonna hurt Saul a little bit here because I think most of my proudest moments are gonna be the director episodes. So, like, the first two-parter we did, like Adam said, about Eric Romer's Communist and Proverb Cycle, like, those recording sessions were grueling. I mean, we're sitting here for 3.5, 4 hours each recording session, and they were sweating. We were getting so tired, and we just persevered. We trimmed away half of the recording time or more. It was an early episode, so it's a bit rougher around the edges, and the recording is not perfect. I thought we actually made a contribution. I thought we had something interesting to say. I don't think we've seen elsewhere. And I thought we complemented each other so well. Like Adam, for instance, was so spot on about the characters and their emotional journeys, which were things that the rest of us had just completely blanked out. And we were sitting there talking about like metaphors. So if Adam had been in an episode, it would have been a boring one, but he managed to interject humanism into it. I think that we just really managed to dive into everything about those films, and that was absolutely just a blast to do, even though it was grueling as well. And we've gotten so much better since then. I mean, that was like a 7-8 hour recording. When we did Moral Tales, we managed to get it down to 3. When we did Tales of 4 Seasons, we got it at under 2 hours. So we've gotten better and better at being concise. But yeah, that's such an early memory for me. I also think that one of the ones I'm the most proud of is The Minimalist World of Robert Bresson. I think that's why we covered every single one of his 13 features and his first short. Like, it's insane. We're never doing that again. But like the fact that we managed to do it, the fact that I thought we had something to say, that was just, and I'm still so happy we managed to do that. And I love so many of those director episodes. Though some of the more general ones are actually still in my mind, like the early Klaus Kinski episode, like Soul said, that was so much fun to record. And I think that if we do more on more bad movies, because often we do podcasts about films we like a lot, but if we do podcasts about films we don't actually like, that might actually free us up a lot to speak more freely. And I'm gonna throw out a controversial opinion here too. One of the most fun recording sessions we ever had, in my opinion, is that more recent controversial episode, Should Strategic Voters in Movie Polls Die? ? Parenthesis, Lauren thinks so. Like, I was just grinning throughout. I know that some of the comedy didn't come out that well. It was a bit controversial afterwards, but like just the session in itself was an absolute blast. Oh, and I actually did find one regret as I was scrolling through our 99 previous episodes to just see, okay, which am I the proudest of? And that one regret is actually our relatively early Tarantino episode, where we talked about whether or not he was a hacker. We talked about his best film. So the hack one is one of those more baity titles, because all of us more or less like Tarantino to various extents. But that's an episode where I don't think we actually did rewatch much or anything, and we just kind of breezed through it, and that could have been more in-depth. So I feel like we didn't quite do him and his films justice when we did that episode. So I finally remembered one regret. Oh, and one other proud moment is the Burkina Faso episode where Brett and I did a solo on that one, and we just talked through some of the biggest films in Burkina Faso's history. That's a unique episode. We haven't really done anything like it again. We might do something like it for Moldova. We might do something like it for other film countries with smaller output. Let's see. But yeah, that was just such a different kind of experience. But overall, I think almost every session I have with you guys, it's just so much fun, no matter the topic.
I thought I might just chime in with a regret, because as you're talking about regrets, I just remembered something else. We do every year do our best of the year podcast. So we did recently do our best films that we've seen of 2023. Before that, we did 2022. The very first one that we did, best films of 2019, most of us didn't actually go out of the way to watch each other's picks. So there were some parts we were talking about a film and then it just cut to the next person because nobody else had seen it. And I think since then we've done a really good job of seeking out each other's picks. If there's something that we really don't think that we'll like, we won't all watch it. So for the 2023 podcast, Tom didn't watch the documentaries that Chris had in his top 5. I didn't watch the Radu Yuda film that Chris had in his top 5. But most of us try to watch our top 5 films. So I think we've come much better at that. But I think the best of 2019 one could be redone better. Although if I did it again now, I'd probably have different films in my top 5.
Oh yeah, I completely forgot about that old episode, like our very, very first go. Yeah, that's definitely something we should have done better in that episode. And I think that's just one of those many little things that we've gotten better and better at as we move along. One thing I actually want to say right off the bat, which I should have said earlier too, is that part of the journey, and like we mentioned, like Saul and I edit almost every episode, and I'm one of the worst at this point with my ass and ums, etc. I think I frustrate Saul to no end by just not managing to get those all out of my system. But we have recorded a few episodes with brand new hosts recently, like I mentioned, and we recorded some episodes with the old school hosts. And when we do episodes with the new hosts, what I notice is that they do all of the things, or usually do all of the things that we used to do. There's a lot of ass, there's a lot of ums, there's a lot of repetitions. And when I listen to episodes with the core, so we have Adam here, we have Tom, we have Saul. We can add in Mathieu too, though it's not really, he has been active for a while. When we have these guys on the podcast, and actually Ben, you did fabulously whenever you've been on as well. Somehow, I don't know how he did it. Same with Adam had a cameo earlier. What else is that it just flows. There's none of those issues. Like when we have some new people on, like so often it can take an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, going over 10 minutes. When it's the older hosts, the experienced hosts, they have gotten used to how to speak, like some of you mentioned earlier. And I can literally it can take just 15, 20 minutes to go through those 10 minutes and just cut down some spaces here and there and things like that. So that's just such a sign that, yeah, you guys have really, really improved along the way. I'm probably the one guy who has improved the least, because I've added quite a few times this episode alone, and so is writing yes in the episode. I need to still work on that, but for everyone else, job well done. So while I've already outed myself as being a terrible heir, let's focus on the positives here, and I'd love to hear what you guys' favorite moments are of the hosts. Could be gaffes, could be running jokes, could be weird conversations or obsessions that keep running through the episodes, or just single moments. Like, are there some standout moments from any of the hosts here that like you still think back to from time to time?
Yes, I have one for Saul. When we did the Straight Story episode, Saul got very angry. Maybe not angry, but Saul was very confused by the lawnmower laws in in America.
This was mine too. I was going to say this.
It turned into I've re-listened to the episode 2 or 3 times, whereas normally I've only ever heard an episode once. But that ended up being a good like half of the episode was on lawnmower laws, and it wasn't even like, it was just so funny because Saul was really quite angry, and I remember I was asking for like people to kind of contact us with the Lawnmower Laws, and I would love to do a joke, like a light-hearted follow-up where Sol talks to us about the Lawnmower Laws of the different states and countries, and we can turn it into like a big discussion. But yeah, from time to time, I still think back to that episode, and it was like maybe one of the most I've ever laughed in an episode because yeah, it was just such a funny kind of a funny thing that we got sidetracked on.
Yeah, me too. That's just absolutely iconic. And we were just like, why isn't he being arrested? Why is it working? What are the laws in different countries? And we were just starting to compare. We were looking it up. We were doing research. We talked about possibly doing a podcast just about lawnmower laws across the world. That was such a blast. Thank you for that experience, Saul.
Yeah, no problem. That was just one of those things where you watch a film and there's something that nags at you during it, and that was my nag with the straight story. I couldn't for the life of me, while watching the film, get it around my head why he wasn't being arrested and why the film wasn't ending with him being thrown in jail. So, yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it is against the law to drive a lawnmower on a highway. So I think David Lynch just took some liberties there.
It's a true story. It happened. It is a true story. So he might have, maybe he was breaking the law, but he did it. It happened. We know for certain. In fact, maybe we can find that. He must be. That was a long time ago. Maybe we can get like his grandson or something on the podcast. That can be the next interview episode. The grandson of the lawnmower man.
Yeah, I mean, from what I remember of the movie, it's been a long time since I've seen it, but he stayed mostly on fairly rural roads, right? So, I don't think small like county sheriffs or local law enforcement's going to bother with something like that.
Yeah, exactly. It was small roads. It wasn't like motorways or anything. But let's not get so back on this for the next half an hour because I feel like he's already angry about being ganged up on and about directors. If we get him on Lawnmower Laws, he's not going to sleep tonight. So let's leave it at that.
So, besides Lawnmower Laws, have there been any other memorable tangents that you guys still think back to sometimes?
I really enjoyed the episode where I think it was Chris and I. We interviewed Adam and Lauren about the origins of the ICM forum and how it sort of got started from what used to be a Facebook group with a very controlling person. I just found it incredibly interesting to listen to. So, yeah, and I just loved the way that Adam and Lauren bounced off each other in the conversations for that one. So, that for me is definitely a highlight, and that is an episode that I've listened to a couple of times also.
Yeah, and to keep bragging about what kind of good job Adam is doing, like one of the episodes I've probably listened to the most are those early Eric Romer episodes. And like I said earlier, like if it hadn't been for him actually following the character journeys and seeing like what they're thinking and also making connections about like the dialogue, how the dialogue reflects back to previous films, like everyone else there would have completely missed that. So I'm always so impressed by the kind of, like, it's not a tangent, it's not funny, it's just genuinely impressed and thinking back at, wow, like he's seeing stuff that I'm not seeing because I'm usually so focused on like the craft and more technical details and maybe metaphors and things like that. But he manages to bring something else to the conversation that I can't, and that always amazes me.
I'm going to keep mentioning it, but the Mary Gillerman episode again had some of my favorite moments. I think there was a lot of laughing in that one. There was like a Sheena discussion as well, which I'm not going to go back into. But there was a discussion about Sheena. Yeah, where basically I had claimed like the director had put that scene in, for a reason, and it went right over her head, and it just became like a really funny misunderstanding about how men watch films versus how women watch films or something like that. Yeah. But that whole episode for me was like one of the most fun I've ever had. And I think we recorded for a long time, and yeah, that was excellent, I think.
Yeah, the Mary episode did go on for a very long time into the wee hours of the morning on my side. I think I actually had to leave because it just got to like 1 a.m. because of the time we're recording at. And what I remember the most about that episode was Adam telling me not to tell Mary how much I hated Waltz of the Toritos. So we're trying to stay on the positives, the things that we liked of John Gillerman's films, rather than go into the negatives.
Oh, and just to say something about Tom so it's not left out, while this pisses me off more than being impressed, it does often flash in my mind. That episode I mentioned earlier, our very last episode, where we tried to gang up on him and it just managed to deflate all of it. So I think Tom gets the trophy for being the most reasonable and the person who can just diffuse almost any situation with clear, logical, and polite conversation.
I think also like we have to mention Chris because obviously Chris has been like a host for the vast majority of the episodes, and if Chris hadn't come up with the idea or had so much like energy with like, you know, hosting the episode, then coming up with like the descriptions, coming up with like the titles, I think he's the one that got the podcast going, and had he not been there, we wouldn't have done it. I thought we would have never started. So yeah, I don't know how you. Obviously, he maintains such an amazing level of energy and enthusiasm about everything, which is like very important, I think. And yeah, Saul's mentioning that sometimes Chris's episode titles go too far. I kind of felt like the one about strategic voters and killing them was one of the more controversial.
Yes, for sure.
But I feel like if we do this for like another 10 years, I kind of dread to think. I feel like with every episode, Chris goes slightly further. And like, I feel like at some point there's going to be a title like Saul is murdered, literally murdered in this episode, and like, we get investigated by the police or something. I'm slightly scared about the future episode titles because Chris has certainly like gone down a certain road.
I think we also need to give a shout out to Chris's dog, who does its best to make an appearance in most episodes, but I don't think it's ever made the cut.
Yes, it's been surprisingly quiet. He's just laying here without shaking his head or dangling his collar or anything right now. So yeah, he's doing very, very well. So no cameo today, it seems.
I also want to give a shout out to Chris's postman, because for whatever reason, the postman seems to come at the same sort of time that we're recording every so often. So Chris will just leave for like 5 or 10 minutes, and Adam will write something in the chat like, Chris is telling the postman about talking images. The postman is now getting bored and he's now murdering Chris. Oh, I'm going to feel so bad if Chris actually is being murdered by the policeman. There's a whole bunch of stuff like that. Some I think we recorded out loud even, and we ended up editing it out. But yeah, Chris's postman does make the episode recordings quite interesting sometimes.
I was genuinely just typing in the chat about the postman just as Saul started talking about that, because there was one time where Chris was gone for about 15-20 minutes, and we genuinely thought like maybe he'd been killed. We were on the verge of phoning the police in Malta, you know, just it was quite worrying. But I also agree with like the suggestion in the chat that Chris's postman would be a good interview episode. I think that would be even just his experiences of delivering post to Chris and talking to him for 10 minutes every time. You know, it might be quite an insight into Chris's life. What, Chris, would your wife be up for coming on at some point?
I don't think she'd actually take part in the episode, but I think when she's spoken on air before, it's just been edited out afterwards.
Yeah, that rings a bell actually. I feel like we can have a Chris's family episode at one point.
I think what should be done is to do a podcast focused on the movie The Postman with Kevin Costner, and then get Chris's postman to comment on it. And then the title Postman on Postman.
Postman on Postman Land. We can try. So we're nearing the end of the episode a little bit here, but I thought it might be fun to share some facts about the podcast so far in terms of statistics, and then talk a little bit about where the podcast is going in the future. So Adam, Scottish Adam, not American Adam, has actually been tracking who's in the most episodes, and not counting this one, but counting the 101 episodes we have recorded previously. So we already recorded a Clint Eastwood episode that's coming next, and also the pilot. Hosts that have been in the most episodes are, as mentioned, me with 95 out of 101, and Sue 96 out of 102. So if this is a competition, I will try to keep winning. And next up is Saul with 80. Then Tom at 53. Mathieu at 42. We're really hoping and trying to get him in for a cameo for this episode. But he will likely be in one coming up very, very soon. So we'll finally hear from Mathieu again. And then we get Adam at 30. So we have 4 of the 5 most frequent podcast hosts in this episode. After that, there's a blast from the semi-past with Clem, who has a regular co-host in almost all of season 1, but since then he's only been in our Romer episodes. So hopefully we'll get him back more in the future as well. Then we have Lauren with 14, Merck and Adam at 10, and a tie between Ben and Brett at 5. Though, of course, now after this episode, Ben will take the lead. And then we have just quite a few people with 4, 3, 2, and obviously a lot of people with 1 episode. So let's see how those numbers start scaling up later. I also want to reveal, finally, for the very first time with general audiences, what our most listened to episodes are. So starting at number 10, we actually have an episode where American Adam was in. I wish he was still here for this, but it's classic westerns versus spaghetti westerns with 238 listens. Next up is that slightly awkward one we talked about, the pilot, at 280. Then, one of my proudest moments, Eric Romer's Comedies and Proverb Cycle Part 1 at 308, though we did clearly have a bit of a drop out with Part 2. Still a well-listened to episode, but not in the top 10. Then it's What the Hell Happened to Godard in the 70s at 328. The famous interview with Mary Gilligan at 338. And now we're starting to get a bit higher here. So we covered the first Dune film, which is Dune the future of big budget blockbusters, at 407. Claire Denis just edging it out at 411. The Being There episode, which featured Autism Through Cinema, a dual podcast, which we frequently listen to. Absolutely recommended as well at 486. We probably enjoyed some of their listeners coming in there for that episode. Hopefully many of them stuck around or are still listening. If you do go to icmforum.com and let us know, like, how many of you learned about us from that episode. And then at 554 listens, The Minimalist World of Robert Bresson. That this is the episode that just keeps being listened to over and over and over again. I mean, this is the episode like that we keep seeing, listen to every single week. So this may at some point take the number 1 spot, but it's not there yet, and it's quite far off, because the number 1 most listened to episode of Talking Images of all time is our interview with Adam Terrell of Third Window Films at 753. So let's see if we can ever hit that again. A lot of these are obviously older episodes. These are the episodes that has been building up over time, but the newer episodes are still getting very good listens, and they will probably reach those kinds of levels in the future. I mean, we entered YouTube just last year, and we already have like new episodes like the Cinema of Burkina Faso getting 91 listens just from that alone. It's already well over 100 in total, so that's one I think will rise up quite far. And I can also say that our most listened to on Spotify, because we used to launch everything on a platform called Sounder, that closed down and we lost all of our stats. We saved them, but when we moved to Spotify, we got new stats. And the number one listened to there in the last year or so since Sounder closed down is The Polite and Heartbreaking World of Yasudiro Usu at 135. So newer episodes are still getting a lot of listens. Thank you to everyone who has been listening so far for making this possible. And hopefully you'll continue to listen. And let's see here in the forum if you actually had pegged some of these as our most listened to. But before we close off this episode, I would love to hear from today's panel here just about what kinds of episodes you'd like to see more of in season 6 and beyond. I mean, is there a dream episode you have been trying to get off the ground or just really, really want to see happen?
I really want us to do a couple of episodes that I've been trying to drum up interest for, but haven't really had much success. One of them is to do an episode focused on stop motion animation, because I think that would be really fun to just discuss a handful of the key films. And also, I'd love to do one on rotoscoping as well, because it's another style of film that really fascinates me, and I think there's be some great films to discuss if we looked at that. So if anyone else wants to do either of those, then please shout up, because it'd be great to have some support for these.
Yeah, I'm definitely in for stop motion at the very least, so let's see if we can make that happen. Well, what about everyone else? What are your dream episodes?
I would really like to do an episode about watching classics on the big screen. That's something that I've really got into in the last 6 to 12 months. There are only really a couple of cinemas in my city who do show the older films, and it's a little bit out of the way to go, and sometimes it's after work, and I've had a tough day, but I just really get a kick out of it. So I would like to talk about that, some of the best reactions I've had to watching classics on the big screen, and just how my opinions have sometimes changed on films, but I haven't been able to get any thumbs up for that idea, so that seems quite unlikely. In terms of some other ideas I've been pushing for a while, I'd be able to do one on the Scream series. I've seen the original 4 films 10 times or more. And I guess another franchise which I'm really big into is the Oceans one, Oceans 11, 12, and 13 by Soderbergh. I've seen all of those films at least 10 times, so that's something which I think I can really easily get into a discussion about. But unfortunately, with those ones over there, finding other people who want to join in is not quite as easy. So those ones have sort of gone under the radar. Another topic that I would like to do, which I pushed a while back, but Chris was the only other person who said yes to it, was doing one on aspect ratios, because I find aspect ratios absolutely fascinating, especially when directors do something which isn't just the standard 185 to 1 or 2.35 to 1, but they try and do a much longer aspect ratio, or sometimes when they try and do a 4:3 for a modern film, or some films that change aspect ratio. I find that quite interesting, but evidently, based on the thumbs up for the ideas, not a lot of people have. But if you're somebody who really likes aspect ratio and would like to join me and Chris for a podcast on that, we could get that up and running. If you're somebody who goes out and watches classic Scream, by all means, join the chat here, and maybe we'll get another thumb up, and maybe we can do an episode on that.
Yeah, let's see, Saul. What about you, Adam? I mean, you've been part of the podcast from the beginning. Are there any episodes you've been trying to push for a very long time, or anything you haven't been able to push through so far?
I think the one I've been trying for the longest is the 500. 500 is less than 400. Like our forum list, I've been trying like every single year for us to do an episode in September or October when we have the results, because I feel like it's a really great list and we should do something to promote it more. I guess I'd also like another Japanese director episode, so maybe I can also follow up, or a totally different director. So shouting no in the chat, but yeah. Unfortunately, so we will have some director episode. I'd like to see the Terry Gilliam one re-recorded, because I hate that we lost an episode even though I wasn't in it. I've also been pushing the Vomitus episode for quite a long time. Adam from New York posted that idea as a joke. It got tons of votes, and it does really well in the poll every year when we try and work out which episodes to do. So I think it'd be nice to have a Vomitus episode. Or, I mean, the Vomitus episode could just be Soul talking about directors. That might turn into the same thing.
So Vomitus is the idea of just talking about people throwing up in films. Just to be clear about that.
And it's just because Adam from New York posted it as a joke. I don't have a weird vomit fetish, and I've been trying to. This is a shorter term thing, but I've been trying to get How We Got Into Movies Part 3, because we have so many people who have participated. It'd be nice to have another episode where it's just the newer people in it. So it's nice sometimes. Sometimes it's nice to just see like newer participants have all the limelight, and kind of. I think that's a nice episode. So that's kind of the main. That's the main ones that I've been. Oh, and obviously, like in general, just more interview episodes. I think anyone connected to film doing another interview episode, they're always my favorites. So I'm hoping we can like find some connections so we can do more episodes like that. And I think there's so many people on the forum. There's probably someone that someone knows that would be happy to speak to us.
Oh yeah. We really, really, really need to do more more interview episodes. So if there's anyone famous listening to this podcast, let's just send us a message. We're willing to hear you, probably. It's like already guaranteed. So just get in touch and let's make that happen. And I can see here from the chat that Arthur actually wants to come back in. He's been listening to the entire episode, which is great just to have that audience and say a little bit about what he's been pushing for. So what would you like to see happen, Arthur?
Yeah, I guess this cameo is more of a lurking kind, if you will. Thinking about Soul's idea, not necessarily classics on the big screen, because that also depended on what city you're living in, but I was thinking about the whole age factor, because the directors I didn't really love when I was 18 or so, I can imagine me loving now that I'm not so much an anti-person nihilist kind of viewer and kind of more aware of historical and socio-political factors. Like the three directors I can think of now are Bergman, Fellini, and Buñuel. I didn't enjoy any other stuff back then, but like I rewatched Winter Light 2 years ago, and that was just phenomenal. So I wonder how I would feel about them now, rewatching a few of each of their films. I guess that still counts as a director-esque kind of thing, so Soul might not be interested in that. One that I would really be pushing for would be So Bad It's Good cinema, especially if any of us would enjoy watching it, how we take into factor rating them and stuff like that. I know my hot take is I rate stuff based on an enjoyment factor. I don't care if it's legit good or so bad it's good, and we might get some heated discussions out of that.
Both of those, and it sounds really good. Actually, I can't believe we haven't done an episode on to what extent our tastes have evolved, or things we used to like when we done, things we didn't care for but suddenly woke up to. I mean, that's happened several times for me, that I've gone back to films that I didn't really care for 10 years ago, and suddenly now I love them. So that's definitely an episode I would be up for. Let's push that and see who votes to be in that. And I guess I'll have the final say too then about the episodes I've been trying to push through and to annoy Saul. Pretty much all of them are director episodes. So I am winning here because the one I'm pushing for the longest is a Louis Buñuel episode that is actually happening this season, unless something changes. It's going to be called The Surreal World of Louis Buñuel. I just can't wait to do that episode. I've also been pushing but been failing to get Agnes Varda episodes off. I've been trying everything. I've been trying early Varda. I've been trying like her documentaries. Like it's not going through. Let's see. I've also been pushing Chantal Akerman. I tried to get John Dielman after it topped Sight and Sound, but not everyone cares for John Dielman as much as me. So that failed, even though this interest could have been very nice to bounce off as well. Soul is writing, why are Varda's films so off-putting? I mean, she's one of the most delightful directors around. I mean, she's top 3 directors for me. Like, this is, like, she's, all right. Oh, he's doing...
It was a suggestion for a title of the episode.
Oh, right, yeah.
So you can suggest in the idea suggestion why Varda films off-putting, and therefore we can say why we don't want to go through our entire filmography. I think I already talked in the past, but I have no interest in seeing John Dielman. But again, that could be a more interesting topic. Why don't people want to watch it? So anyway, I'm gonna shut up for the moment.
Yeah, that's a good general one, I guess. Oh, and the one general I actually did, or semi-general, it could have been the viewer have too, that I really pushed was minimalism. So I really want to talk about minimalism, like especially what I call extreme minimalism, which pissed some people off. That could have been controversial because some people don't see like soft minimalism as minimalism, but maybe that's also dull as hell. We will, however, have maximalism as an episode, either coming up now in season 5 or next year in season 6. So that's something to watch out for. That should be a big blast, and we'll get one of our less frequent but this year more regular co-host Niels in for that one too. So that's just so nice to just have a consistent rush of new hosts. For anyone listening to this episode, actually, like, we are always looking for new hosts, new people to share opinions and experiences and thoughts. So if you actually want to participate in this, just send us a message either on the ICM forum, actually best on ICM forum. Just join up, send me a PM, or just post about it in the threads. and we can set something up. That would be absolutely excellent. Like the more, the better, even if you're not part of the community already, because like Tom said, like he wasn't an active member of the community properly before he joined this. And it's just such a great way to talk about film and share the love of film, and also get some different tastes and moods in as well. And this goes especially out to people who would be interested in getting our episode off the ground for me. So let's see. I don't really have any more question here, guys. I mean, I was thinking about asking if we should sell out, but it doesn't really look like we are selling out yet. Maybe in our 200th episode, that's what we'll do. We'll like suddenly we're just talking about the Marvel movies and the latest blockbusters, and everything's getting thousands of views, and we're just laughing about how silly we were talking about the kinds of episodes, like doing the kinds of episodes we used to do. But I don't think that's going to happen. So I would just like to just thank all of you guys for participating, and let you have a final word of just what you'd like where do you think this show will be at episode 200? Do you think it will happen?
I hope it happens. I like to think that I'll still be here chatting to you guys, winding Sol up about how he watches his films, and just having some great discussions. And hopefully, as I mentioned earlier, maybe the 200th episode will be on camera, so everyone can see our wonderful faces, and I can finally see what you guys look like, because I haven't got a clue. I could walk past you in the street and I wouldn't know.
Who knows? Maybe that will end up happening before that as well. I mean, we have our YouTube channel up now. It's obviously still fairly small, but we're getting more and more decent views there. So who knows? Maybe we'll start live streaming, doing all kinds of crazy stuff. Like you in our community can see to that happening, and obviously the more people listening to us, the more we'll do different kinds of things too. So tell your friends, tell everyone. What about you, Adam? Like, where do you think this show will go for the next 100 episodes? Like, where are we in? I guess Sol's writing at 200 episodes will be in 2028. So where do you see this show being then?
Yeah, I think we'll still be on the go, because we started off with a small group of people taking part. We've got so many more people now take part. I don't think we can ever run out of episodes, because there's always there's endless topics to discuss. I really like Tom's idea of doing some kind of video episode, like some kind of live stream, like YouTube one. I also think, it would be great to record one in person, like, in Malta or Scotland or something, have like 2 or 3 people recording an episode. That would be quite interesting. But yeah, I think we'll keep going for a few more years. I don't see any reason why we wouldn't.
The only reason why I think we might not keep on going is just that editing the episodes is a very large workload. And at this stage, Chris and myself, I work full time. I assume Chris does also. We're using a lot of spare time to get one episode each edited per month. That way we can release one every 2 weeks. And I think if my life gets busier, if Chris' life gets busier and nobody else joins us on the editing team, the podcast might become less and less frequent. So I don't really want to end on a negative note, but if there's anybody out there with editing skills, we're just using Audacity, incredibly easy app to use. Definitely be great to have you on board, because we need you listeners to support us if you want us going for another 4 years to get up to 200 episodes.
Good shout out there. So not negative at all. I mean, this is something we've been talking about for a long time as well. And sometimes Adam helps out, sometimes Lauren helps out. Clem used to edit a lot before his life got too busy. That is a big concern, obviously. Maybe we'll have to scale down at some point. But yeah, if anyone's listening here and have basic editing skills, it doesn't even take that terribly long. Just probably few hours per episode of just actually sitting down and doing it. Unless there's a lot of ahs and ums and errors and glitches, etc. So like if anyone can step up there, please do. And this is something we promised before as well. If you do join as an editor, we will guarantee you that we'll do an episode of your choice. So you can force our hand as well. So that's just a general promise. If you come in, you say, hi guys, I'll edit an episode for you. We'll record whichever episode you want us to do, with or without you, if you're camera or mic shy. Oh, I see Sol is writing here that I didn't actually promise him this. So yes, Saul, you can pick any episode as well. Go for it. So with this general promise, do an episode, get an episode made. I think we're out of it. I think we've been able to celebrate our 100th episode with a bit of style, with a bit of backroom chatter, with a lot of just talking about how much we love the record episodes to Saul's detriment. And yeah, just here's to 200, whenever that is. Here's to the next several years. I mean, we have episodes planned that will go into 2026 for sure. So stay tuned, keep listening. Go through our backlog as well. Leave comments. Go to icmforum.com. We'll have a thread set up for this episode. We actually just created a subforum finally after close to 5 years, specifically for Talking Images too. So it's going to be much easier to find the episodes. Just go there and comment on the threads. Talk about the episodes. Share your memories. And yeah, let's make the next 5 years happen. Thank you so much, everyone. Good night.
You have been listening to Talking Images, the official podcast of icmforum.com.